a fighter and champion for Nevada.
Senator Reid was such an effective advocate and supporter and a true Nevadan.
A battle-born legacy forever felt in the Silver State. Today, Nevadans, local leaders, and even the first family coming together to remember longtime Senator Harry Reid.
Senator Reid was a mentor, a political champion, and a larger-than-life figure to me and to so many other Nevadans.
Just as down home or down to earth as you can be. Their home was open to us when needed.
Remembered as a proud Nevadan and tenacious leader. And today a memorial service is being held for him. Our special coverage, Battle-Born Legacy, Remembering Harry Reid, starts right now.
We'll be involved in the past any way we need to be, but we're going to look to the future. I wish everyone the best.
And thank you for joining us this morning on this somber day for our state, the Valley, and everyone who knew and cared for Senator Harry Reid. Hello, I'm Tricia Keene, and for the next hour and a half, we will look back at the incredible life and legacy of Senator Reid and show you the memorial service for him today. We have team coverage on this historic day, from his incredible impact on Nevada to what he meant to diversity here in our country, to his roots in a small town called Searchlight, to his role within the Gaming Commission. And we will touch on all of it today for you. But first, we begin with my co-anchor, Dave Crevassier, this morning, who joins us live from the Smith Center in downtown Las Vegas. And Dave, there are so many dignitaries from all over coming to this memorial today.
It's so true, Tricia. They practically moved the entire seat of government from Washington, D.C. to here in Las Vegas today. President Biden, former President Obama, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, also the acting president of the Quorum of 12 from the LDS churches here from Salt Lake City, and even singer Carole King. Now, Harry Reid, of course, meant a lot to all of those people. He was loved by the folks he served here in Nevada. And in this half hour, you'll hear the stories and the many other ceremonies that are going to start here in about a half an hour at the Smith Center. It'll be at capacity, and we'll be carrying it live. Back to you.
See, this is live video of the hearse arriving and honor guard taking Harry Reid's casket into the Smith Center today. Harry Reid was Nevada's longest serving senator, his legacy certainly unmatched, and his devotion to the Silver State unquestioned. And this morning, we look back at his life of service and where it all began. From Searchlight, Nevada, to the most powerful seat in the U.S. Senate, Harry Reid began his life in 1939 to very humble beginnings. His childhood home, a shack with no indoor toilet, hot water, or telephone. He attended Basic High School in Henderson, where he played football and was an amateur boxer. At Basic, Reid met future Nevada Governor Mike O'Callahan, who was a teacher there and served as Reid's boxing coach. But he also met his future wife there, Landra Gould.
She's been the being of my existence in my personal life and my public life. The magic of first love is that it never ends. I believe that. She's my first love. I will never end.
Together, they had 5 children, including Rory Reid, former Clark County Commission chairman. Harry Reid attended college in Utah, and he and his wife, who was born Jewish, converted to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But Reid, a lifelong advocate for equal rights and tolerance, spoke out against anti-Semitism and hate as recently as April of 2019 at UNLV. Reid, a natural advocate, earned his law degree. He first stepped into public life, and he began as Henderson City Attorney before being elected to the Nevada Assembly back in 1968. In 1970, at age 30, Reid was chosen by Mike O'Callahan as his running mate for Lieutenant Governor of Nevada. Reid and O'Callahan both won their races. After serving as Lieutenant Governor, Reid made his first bid for the U.S. Senate and lost. In 1975, Reid ran for mayor of Las Vegas and lost. He took a break from campaigning to serve as chairman of the Nevada Gaming Commission from 1977 to 1981. But still with a passion for politics, Reid served as a U.S. congressman from Nevada. And in 1986, he ran for U.S. Senate again and won, serving from 1987 to 2017.
Hold it. Like Goliath, they think their giant muscle and power will defeat me. They don't know their history. Right, big boy?
In that time, he became a Senate Majority and Minority Leader, as well as the chairman of the Senate Democratic Caucus.
I love the Senate. I don't need to dwell on that. I love the Senate. I care about it so very, very much. I've enjoyed Congress for 34 years.
Through his career, he had the ear of many U.S. presidents with a close bond with President Barack Obama. Even though the boy from Searchlight became a Washington insider, he never stopped advocating for change in Nevada. He was local about renaming McCarran Airport, calling former Senator Patrick McCarran, the airport's namesake, a racist and anti-Semite. Of course, today, the airport has been renamed after Harry Reid.
What's your formula for success? What do you recommend? And I tell them the same thing about working hard. Of course, that's important. Of course, it's important. But also, stay true to who you are, your roots.
It's probably fitting that former President Barack Obama will be giving the eulogy today. Obama came to depend heavily on Harry Reid, who was able to come through with the Senate on some key votes for a heavy agenda, especially the Affordable Care Act. They became quite a one-two punch in Washington during the collaboration for all the legislative priorities that Mr. Obama had. Tricia?
That's right, Dave. And you know, the service program was unveiled yesterday of today's service, and it's going to start with members of the Reid family, remembering the former senator. Then Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi will say a few words before Carole King performs In the Name of Love. Then former President Barack Obama and President Joe Biden will honor Harry Reid as well. And Brandon Flowers of the band The Killers will perform Home Means Nevada. So they have a very special lineup today at the memorial service, Dave.
It's expected to be a rather somber day for his colleagues and loved ones for Reid, especially when they take part in the eulogy.
Absolutely. And we want to get right to Sean Delancey right now, who's joining us from the Smith Center with more on today's service. Sean.
Yeah, Dave and Tricia, it has been impressive watching the number of dignitaries and people who knew and loved Harry Reid streaming into the Smith Center today. You can see the Secret Service barricades that have been erected right in front of the building there. Everybody had to go through those to be cleared to ensure that everybody was safe inside of the services today. You know how charged the political environment is these days. And talking with Governor Steve Sisolak here just before the event, he fondly remembered the last time that he talked with Reid, the day that the airport was named for him. And Sisolak says that he was the victim of Reid's classic hang-up.
He called me up that evening, and I was surprised because his name showed up on my phone, and because he hadn't been texting or calling much prior to that. And he said, Governor, it's Harry, I just want to tell you thank you very much. And I said, wow, a pleasure to talk to you. And he goes, not much else, just want to say thank you for doing that. It means an awful lot to me and my family. And just started clicking, no goodbye. He just hung up the phone. So that was very special to me.
Now, the security presence within the Smith Center is very high, but outside these barricades here, Metro is on high alert at all ends. There have been some protesters who have come through this area specifically. They have been chanting some Joe Biden lost the election mantras, some anti-vax conspiracies, things along those lines. And we're keeping an eye on that. It is a funeral, but again, these are some very charged times. There were also some supporters on the east or the west end of the Smith Center with signs saying, "We love Harry Reid, we're going to miss him," things along those lines. So you hate to bring politics into an environment like this, but these are the times. Sean Delancey, 13 Action News.
All right, Sean, thank you
Sean.
so
Well,
much.
from the boxing ring to the floor of the United States Senate, Harry Reid, he was a fighter in every sense of the word.
That is for sure. And Reid was actually an amateur boxer at Basic High School in Henderson, and that grew into a lifelong love for the sport. Now, James Smitty Smith is the longtime host of the boxing show In This Corner, and he got to interview Harry Reid back in 2018 ahead of his induction into the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame. And the two talked about those teenage years as a boxer and loving the sweet science.
He was more than anything a boxing fan. He loved pugilism. He loved the sweet science. And he had like I do and all of us that are addicted to this sport, he had a real love for the fighters themselves.
You know, Harry Reid, roots meant a lot to him, from his small town where he grew up in Searchlight to the community just 60 miles just south of Las Vegas.
Right, and Jeremy Chen has more on how Harry Reid never really lost his roots from Searchlight.
Senator Harry Reid had left a lot of fingerprints here in Searchlight, being this is the town that he grew up in, and also the people here say he was someone they truly cared for as a friend.
The museum exhibit is designed to be self-guided.
Walking through the Searchlight Historic Museum, you'll come across an exhibit on Searchlight personalities. One famous name, Harry Reid, the tenacious U.S. Senator who people here saw as just a friendly neighbor.
Just as down home or down to earth as you can be. Their home was open to us when needed.
Judge Richard Hill had known Senator Reid and his wife for decades, helping tend to their garden at their home.
You would never know when they were home of the titles or the places he'd been and the things he'd done. It was just Searchlight. He loved Searchlight to be able to come back here.
Senator Reid's family had deep roots, with his grandfather being one of the first settlers in the community.
His dad was a hard rock miner. That's what Searchlight's existence is. It actually vied for the county seat at the time. It was across the century.
All around Searchlight, Senator Reid's name is prominent, from the elementary school to a street. Longtime friend Stan Colton says the senator made sure to bring infrastructure to the area, like the town's post office.
When I introduced Harry on the steps of the post office, and he made the commemorative speech for the opening of the new post office.
Colton says if Senator Reid was busy in Washington, he would still make time to keep in touch with his community with phone calls.
What's going on at Searchlight? What's going on anywhere? And it was sort of touching base with me so I could give him some information about what was going on in his old hometown.
If you're interested in learning more about Senator Reid's time here in Searchlight, you can come over to the Historic Museum in the community when it's open. Jeremy Chen, 13 Action News.
Senator Reid also left quite an impact on his colleagues and his current Nevada lawmakers.
And 13 Action News reporter Abel Garcia joins us live right now from the KTMV Live Center with how lawmakers remember Senator Reid. Abel, I know you spoke with them recently.
Tricia and Dave, good morning. I got the chance to speak with our U.S. representatives and senators ahead of the memorial service for Senator Reid, and they repeatedly described him as a champion for Nevada and a true family man.
Everything he did was focused on the best interest for the state of Nevada and everybody who lived here. Not just based on your party, not just based on your background. Everybody who lived here, every company that lives in Nevada, that's what his focus was. And he spent his time over the years making sure that individuals, families, they all had the opportunity to succeed at that American dream.
It was a joy to work with him on Nevada things because he was very effective and focused on getting the right things done for Nevada in public lands. And you say, well, public lands is whatever. It's like public lands is 85% of the state. So when you say that, that covers a lot of territory.
He was lieutenant governor, head of our gaming commission. He was in the United States House, I think 5 terms in the United States Senate. So a long list of accomplishments. But I do believe that if you asked him, his greatest accomplishment would be his 62 years of marriage, raising his family, and the impact that he made on people's personal lives.
I also spoke with Congressman Stephen Horsford, who called Senator Harry Reid a mentor, a political champion, and a larger-than-life figure to Horsford and so many other Nevadans. All leaders we spoke to say the former Democratic leader's major legislative battles will be remembered for a lifetime by many Nevadans. Tricia and Dave, I'll send it back to you.
All right, Abel, thank you so much. And you know, Dave, I know you had the chance to interview Harry Reid before. I had the chance to interview him many times too. And one thing I really remember about Harry Reid is his love of family, but also he was very bottom line and very serious about tending to business for Nevada.
It really is. You know, he one of the hats that he wore as a public servant was as the chairman of the Gaming Commission, and it was a position that oftentimes put him really at odds with the mob.
That's right, and you have more on that in this story.
The job of gaming commissioner may sound dull, but back in the day, it got pretty rugged. The mob still had considerable influence in Las Vegas when Harry Reid took the position.
At the time that he was on that commission was a time when the mob was still very involved in Las Vegas. And the mob was ran a lot of casinos, was involved in skimming at a lot of the casinos. And there were a lot of controversies that Harry Reid had to deal with when he was on the commission.
Big names like Lefty Rosenthal, Tony Spilatro, and the Hole in the Wall gang liked to push their weight around.
Reid described this as one of the toughest jobs he ever had. You know, there were death threats that he received on a regular basis.
At one point, Harry's wife, Landra, unknowingly was endangered in a bomb meant for Harry.
There was one incident where his car, one of his family cars, was set up to explode, and his wife was driving it at the time. She actually discovered there was something funny going on with the car, stops the car, and discovered this wire that had been attached to a spark plug, and then it ultimately ran somewhere into the car and then out to the gas tank.
Unfazed, Gaming Commissioner Harry Reid succeeded in changing the face of the casino industry in Nevada, and he did it with his typical style.
Harry Reid was known as a very tough politician. He was a hard-nosed, politician, but he also was very soft-spoken, and he was not a person to raise his voice.
You know, Tricia, it's easy to forget that he was more than just a senator. Before that, he served as the lieutenant governor. He was elected to the U.S. Congress, and he was even the district attorney in Henderson for a while.
Yeah, and he practiced as a lawyer here for a while. I know he defended timeshare business, other businesses as well.
Right, and even his son, for a while, was also an elected official. He was a county commissioner and did have an unsuccessful run for governor, so it's kind of in the family.
It really is. I know out of the city of Henderson, his son Josh was the attorney for the city of Henderson as well. So it's a big family, 5 kids, 19 grandchildren, and a lot of them will be at the service today. He did so much, including human rights. He was a big advocate, Dave, and I had interviewed him several times at UNLV. He was a big champion of human rights, and he was also, his wife, born Jewish, they converted to LDS Church, but he was outspoken about anti-Semitism, and that's why he wanted the airport changed, because he called McCarran an anti-Semite. We'll have more on that interview later, but now we want to hear from Alicia Patillo, and she heard from the late senator about equality for all.
A champion of civil rights.
He empowered the LGBT community.
A voice for the voiceless.
Senator Reid really was a friend of the Latino community.
And a man who truly cared about human rights for all.
Senator Reid was a champion on civil rights, on immigrant rights, on labor rights.
Harry Reid spent a lifetime flourishing in the face of adversity.
Senator Reid came from really humble beginnings, and I don't think he ever lost that. I think that Senator Reid was always from Searchlight.
From Searchlight to Washington, Senator Reid kept the people of Nevada first in his heart.
Senator Reid empowered us as activists.
For Derek Washington, Reid's personal impact in his life began in 2010 when Washington was fighting to help repeal the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. The law which allowed gay, lesbian, and bisexual people to serve their country as long as they kept their sexual identity sealed. Washington says it was Reid that helped a small team in Las Vegas fight to repeal the policy, gain voters, and take back their power in the LGBTQ community.
That one simple fact of repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell changed the world for LGBTQ.
As Reid blazed the trail for the LGBTQ community, he embraced a human rights approach for equality, speaking with our own Trisha Keene years ago. When prejudice against the Jewish community rose in our valley, he rallied for peace and equal rights for all.
We have to speak out against hate.
Reid spent decades crusading for the rights of the underserved and underrepresented until systemic change actually occurred. Cecia Alvarado saw his impact on Latino voters firsthand.
Traditional politicians didn't try to reach Latinos because they said we didn't show up to vote. And Senator Harry Reid really changed the narrative. He spent that time, money, energy, to reach the Latino community and recognize the importance. And we show up for him, and he won the 2010 election. And so he really put a value in our vote as Latinos and also as a community.
He was influential in creating a roadmap to citizenship for some of the most vulnerable communities.
And he used his office and he used his power and his platform to help our community through things like championing the DREAM Act and the ACA.
While making sure his staff was a reflection of the Las Vegas Valley.
He had a very diverse staff. He made sure his staff spoke Spanish. He made sure he had Latinos, Latinas.
Senator Reid spent his entire lifetime bridging the divide. Alicia Batillo, 13 Action News.
Of course, this isn't the first time Senator Reid has been honored. The longtime lawmaker also received a tribute at Capitol Hill back in 2016 for his 60 years of service in the Senate, 30 years of service in the Senate.
And 13 Action News reporter Abel Garcia joins us once again with the messages from two prominent political figures. Abel.
Trisha and Dave, a ceremony was held to unveil the Senate leadership portrait of former Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid in 2016. Then Vice President Joe Biden and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton were among the speakers who honored Reid.
No matter how high he rose here in Washington, he never lost touch with the people and values he grew up with back in Searchlight. I've walked the neighborhoods, sat in union halls, met workers in casino kitchens, and everywhere I went, Nevadans told me how much it meant to them to have Harry Reid as their corner man.
You always knew the one person in your crowd who, when you were jumped by 2 or 3 guys, would jump in even though he was going to get the hell beat out of him too. No, I'm serious. I'm being deadly earnest. That's you, Harry. Always, always there, except the difference between you and me, you knew how to box.
The portrait hangs in the U.S. Capitol near the Senate chamber. And of course, Senator Reid served in the Senate for 30 years. And a special tribute for a very honorable and well-known man from more than 5 years ago. And today his colleagues will honor his legacy once again. Dave and Trish, I'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Abel. Senator Harry Reid, of course, a favorite son of Nevada. Whether you agreed with his politics or not, it's pretty fair to see he was a hard worker and always tried doing what he thought was best for the state.
Absolutely. And 13 Action News anchor Todd Quinones looks back at how Senator Reid changed Nevada forever.
In a barren swath of land in the Nevada desert, Harry Reid's legacy blossoms. Yucca Mountain, a planned nuclear waste dump about 90 miles northwest of Las Vegas, never fulfilled that designation, largely because of opposition from Reid. David DeMoore chairs the Department of Political Science at UNLV.
I think in his estimation, and I think in most people in Southern Nevada, particularly those people on Las Vegas Boulevard, saw that as a potential disaster, right?
As Reid's political power grew in the Senate, he helped stall the project, eventually helping convince former President Barack Obama to end the funding to haul nuclear waste through Nevada.
Any sort of slip up in the transit or any sort of issue would have pretty much shut down our economy for an extensive period of time here.
Another potential disaster emerged in 2009. Las Vegas was being hit really hard by the Great Recession. There were concerns construction of City Center could stop.
He did save City Center.
Chris Giunciliani was a Clark County commissioner during that time and worked closely with Reid.
He had our back, let's put it that way. And when Harry said he was going to do something, he did it.
The Great Recession hit. City Centers, 2/3 of the way through. The costs had already gone up significantly. They were running out of creditors.
Reid is credited with helping secure the financing needed for the massive project to move forward.
That funding made a difference in hotel workers, culinary union workers, your valets, all the people that were affected.
By keeping a large project like that going, using his clout to keep the credit flowing to that project, he also allowed, not just MGM in City Center and the Strip, but also the families who are dependent upon those jobs.
It was a way to help not just the gaming industry, it's the people that the gaming industry served in the long run.
Reid's environmental legacy extends well beyond Yucca Mountain. He helped establish Great Basin National Park in eastern Nevada.
Great Basin National Park, first national park in Nevada. That helped not just Nevada, it helped all the rural counties and for tourism components.
No matter the issue, Giunciliani says Reid was always a statesman.
He was always willing to learn a different position. And I respect him more for that than anything else.
Todd Quinones, 13 Action News.
Yeah, what a body of work in his time. And millions of people, of course, fly into and out of Harry Reid every year. And in December, McCarran International Airport officially became Harry Reid International Airport. And so now it is Harry Reid International. Dave?
Yeah, the last big honor bestowed on the late senator, majority leader. Anchor Kalina Estrino shows you why supporters believe Reid's values perfectly align with the Las Vegas we know today.
As governor, I commend his actions and the outstanding progress that has been made possible under his leadership. And it is only fitting to rename the airport in the city and state to which he has given so much.
Months after elected officials voted unanimously to change the name of our airport, Governor Sisolak and several government and community leaders joined Harry Reid's son in celebrating the official moment.
My dad was born in a two-room shack in a lonely spot in the southern Nevada desert. All he had was a work ethic and a small circle of people that loved him. Despite that, he rose. He became a prominent national political figure unlike any other in Nevada's history.
The name change push began years ago, but momentum really picked up in 2021. Supporters saying the legacy of late Nevada Senator Pat McCarran no longer reflected the Las Vegas we know and love.
McCarran really was not a good name for a town that is ethnically and racially as diverse as we are now.
But family and friends say Harry Reid's roots, commitment, passion to serve our community, and fight for change is more representative of the vision and culture of our city today.
It's a tremendous accomplishment.
Stephen Klubeck was a driving force behind the change as well. He donated and rallied support. Klubeck says Harry Reid was a father figure to him, and he's thrilled to see his legacy live on.
To me, it was doing something for somebody that earned it and should be bestowed this honor. He was thrilled, just thrilled, just beyond words.
While the former majority leader wasn't able to attend the ceremony in person, he did release a statement that reads in part, quote, "For my whole life, I've been coming and going from McCarran Airport since the first time I ever got on a plane back in 1958. Home means Nevada. And for me, the airport long ago became synonymous with home."
The Reid family is eternally grateful because this ensures that those two narratives, that of my father, Harry Reid, and of this city, Las Vegas, will be inextricably linked in our community's future. So thank you very much for this honor. 1,000 times thank you.
Kalina Estrinos, 13 Action News.
Now, out at the airport, changes to signs and more will take some time. The renderings have been released of what the signage will actually look like at the airport. So far, social media handles have changed, as well as the airport name on the aircraft navigation maps. No taxpayer dollars, by the way, were spent on these big changes. It was all donations raised privately.
And Dave, what an honor that Harry Reid actually got to see the name change happen in his lifetime. It will certainly keep his legacy alive here in Nevada. But Dave, I know you actually spoke with Harry Reid about his incredible legacy. So what could you tell us about what he told you in that interview?
You're right, Tricia. I had the pleasure of interviewing him several times in the last year or so. He was always very accessible, sharp as a tack. You know, I especially asked him in one of his talks with me, what do you think your legacy should be? What would you hope your legacy would be? And you know, he was very forceful, but Harry Reid was also pretty humble, and he wanted to give credit to others that he had worked with throughout the years, but he mostly said he just wanted to be remembered as a public servant who put Nevada first.
And that's amazing that he's very, very, very hard worker for Nevada. Well, it's time to listen in to the memorial service that is happening right now. Let's take a listen.
Welcome, friends, family, brothers and sisters all. We gather today to honor and celebrate the life and legacy of Harry Reid. My name is Marcus Faust, and I am honored to have been asked to conduct this service for my friend Harry. On behalf of the Reid family, I express deep and heartfelt appreciation to all of you for attending today, including those who are observing this service remotely via the internet. Special thanks to all who have assisted with this funeral service, especially the Smith Center for hosting us today. The family is honored today, including those who are observing this service remotely via the internet. Special thanks to all who have assisted with this funeral service, especially the Smith Center for hosting us today. The family is honored by the attendance of President Joseph Biden, First Lady Jill Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Second Gentleman Mr. Doug Emhoff, and former President Barack Obama. We acknowledge the presence of hundreds of other government leaders, including Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, Nevada Governor Steve Sisolak, the Nevada Congressional Delegation, and other esteemed members and former members of Congress. We also recognize religious leaders of many faiths, and from Senator Reid's own faith, President M. Russell Ballard of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints reflects his deep belief in serving others. Like the Apostle Paul, Harry Reid can now say, "I fought the good fight. I finished my course. I have kept the faith." The opening prayer for this service will now be offered by Harry and Landra's granddaughter, Ella Joy Reid. Our first speaker will be President M. Russell Ballard, acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. For many of President Ballard's 93 years, he was Harry's close spiritual advisor. Following President Ballard's remarks, we will hear personal reflections from each of Harry and Landra's 5 children. First, Lana Reid Behringer, then Key Reid, followed by Josh Reid. Following Josh, Brandon Flowers will perform "Be Still," a song with deep significance to the Reid family. We will then hear from Leif Reid and Rory Reid. After Rory concludes, we will be honored to hear tributes and memories from the leaders of Congress, where Senator Reid served for 34 years. First from Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, and then from Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi. Now the invocation by Ella Joy Reid.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for the opportunity to be here, honor Poppy, and celebrate his life. We thank Thee for allowing us to have known and loved him. We are grateful that Poppy is at rest and he is no longer in pain. We thank Thee for watching over him until we see him again. Please bless Poppy to know how much we love him. Please bless that we can carry his desire to learn and kind heart with us. Please help us to look after Poppy's wonderful children and take care of his favorite person, our sweet Grammy. We say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
You could have put the pulpit on that side, and an old man, 90 years old, wouldn't have far to walk. President and Dr. Biden, Vice President Harris, and Mr. Emhoff, former President Obama, Speaker Pelosi, Leader Schumer, and other distinguished friends, I greet you warmly as we gather to honor and remember our friend and colleague, Harry Reid. To Landra, Lana, Rory, Leaf, Josh, and Key, it's an honor for me to be invited to speak as we pay tribute to your beloved husband, father, grandfather, and our dear friend. I know Harry loves each and every one of you deeply. I bring the love of the First Presidency in the quorum of the 12 Apostles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Harry and Landra joined our church soon after their marriage at age of 19, and they've been faithful disciples of Jesus Christ with firm belief that we are all brothers and sisters, children of a loving Father in heaven. In my calling as an apostle of Jesus Christ, I had many personal visits with my friend Harry. We would counsel together and share personal experiences of faith. In more recent years, we shared a similar plight. We each lost sight in one eye at about the same time. He in his right eye and me in my left. We used to remind each other that we could walk down the street arm in arm. He could help me see things on the left, and I could help him see things on the right. At times, Senator Reid, he really was all business. When he would call, the conversation was usually quick and to the point. And when our conversation was over, I don't ever remember him saying goodbye. The phone clicked, and the line was dead. That was Harry Reid. This morning, as I was with his family, I was finally able to say to my dear friend, goodbye. But there was another side to Harry from his humble beginnings in Searchlight, Nevada, to his eventual prominence as a world leader. Harry Reid was a man of faith in word and in deed. In the New Testament, Jesus Christ taught, "Inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me." Harry cared for the least of these, those who were less fortunate, hungry, sick, or those who had any number of challenges. Senator Reid was also a great teacher of this principle. On one occasion, when speaking to students at the Brigham Young University, he taught about his conviction for service. He said, "Many have chosen to pursue an educational direction pointed toward lucrative field. There's nothing wrong," he said, "with seeking a career that will bring you financial success. But never forget the clarion call of the Book of Mormon prophet, King Benjamin. When you are in the service of your fellow beings, you are only in the service of your God." My dear friend Harry lived what he taught. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we strive to visit and care for the individual needs of others. When we minister this way, we are representing Jesus Christ and acting as his agents to watch over, lift, and strengthen those around us. Of Harry Reid's religious leaders, many have commented that he was the best minister in their congregation. Even during his years as one of the nation's most powerful political leaders, he always made time to minister to the least of these, and he did it one by one. Because of his faith in Jesus Christ, he never forgot to reach out to the one. To you, Landra, and to your family, we have the assurance that Harry has returned to the God who gave us life and awaits his joyful reunion with you after this life. And through the perfect and eternal atonement of Jesus Christ, you and your family can be reunited. I share my love for you and my witness as an apostle of the Lord Jesus Christ that this is true. And I do so in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Hello. When my family was planning today's memorial, my major request was there be a woman on the program. But it's possible that may have backfired. I didn't think that would mean me. But I'm actually very glad to talk about my father and show you how much we love our dad. Earlier this week, when I was thinking about what I might say, my cousin sent me a eulogy my dad gave at for his mom, my grandma Lolo, at her funeral. He said, and I quote, "It was not one thing that reminded me of my mother, but many little things." In remembering my father here today, I will follow his lead by remembering him in many little ways. There are so many little things I'd like you to know about him. For one, he was just really entertaining to be around because of his particular sense of humor. He made us laugh all the time. No matter where we were or what we were doing, he made life more fun and joyful. Sometimes during church, when we got restless, he would jot down a little poem, usually a Roses Are Red type poem, but it wasn't the kind of ending to a Roses Are Red poem that you would expect. It was really off the wall, and it made us enjoy church just that much more. There are As kids, there were endless games of hide and seek with him, and he never tired of tossing us on the bed when he got home from work. He would take us to Baskin-Robbins or Lovett's Frozen Custard almost every night in the summer. And he allowed us to get whatever we wanted. He was the same way when he took us out to eat, partly because he liked our leftovers. He always let us pick, and that gave us some autonomy to feel like our choices were good choices. Also, he was always generous, so that was a part of him allowing us to pick what we wanted. When I was a kid, my dad used to run marathons. A lot of times he would go on a training run and tell us to come find him. We'd get in the car with my mom to look for him and follow him until he was ready to stop. Or sometimes we'd let him out of the car at Railroad Pass and then he would run to Searchlight. Once, when I was a very little kid, I got to follow him on my bike all the way down the Las Vegas Strip. When my mom found out where we'd been, that was the last time I was able to follow him down the Las Vegas Strip. My dad was a great friend, and he had an eclectic group that he stayed close to his whole life. There were many times I got to hear him call many of you that are sitting in this room, or probably most of you sitting in this room. He enjoyed it when we brought our friends home. As we grew up, our house was a gathering place. We loved to be at home with our parents, and they welcomed our friends. My dad loved this and spent a lot of time getting to know our friends, and they became his friends. Later, when Steve and I had our own kids, we tried to follow the example my parents had set. My parents spent a lot of time at our house too and got to know our children's friends, and we had many Sunday dinners with Grammy and Poppy at our house, something we have missed since they've moved back to Las Vegas. Our children have so many stories about things their Poppy said to their friends, some of them shocking, but always good-natured. About 20 years ago, my parents downsized. There was about a 6-month gap between the sale of their house and when they were ready to move into their condo. So they moved into our basement during that time. The bulk of the basement was the kids' playroom, with a small guest room off to the side. We loved having my parents live with us, but it wasn't exactly a 5-star accommodations. My parents shared the trundle bed that all my brothers at one point had slept in. And every morning, my dad was forced to maneuver around toys before his security detail picked him up to take him to the Capitol. At that time, I bet he was the only senator who had to navigate Legos, Playmobil, and the beautiful puppet stage that was made like a castle that my husband Steve and my mom painted. I look back at that time so fondly because he was pulled in so many different directions. But when he was home, he was just Poppy. He didn't want to talk about work. He wanted to talk about us. He made things fun and joyful for my kids in the same way he had made them fun and joyful for me. And just like he made us a priority growing up, he made all his grandchildren his priority. My dad always went out of his way to do things to make me feel special. My all-time favorite surprise was on my 11th birthday, when my parents took me to see the Osmonds. Before the concert, I got to go backstage and meet all of them, especially Donnie, which made my 11-year-old heart skip a beat, and I could barely breathe. And I have the pictures to prove it. A friend said to me this week, "Thank you for sharing your dad with the country." And at first I was confused because while it is a very sweet sentiment, it's not totally true. The truth is, I didn't feel like I had to share my dad with anyone. He was always there for our family, and he made time for anything that was important to us. So while I am grateful that he was so beloved by all of you, and that the country shares in our family's mourning, he never made us share his time and attention with anyone, and I will be forever grateful for that. This is the most important thing in my talk. Nobody loved me the way my dad loved me. He was a wonderful father who loved me unconditionally, and he always made my mom, me, and my brothers his priority. I will miss him greatly. I will love him forever, and I am grateful that families are forever.
My father wrote me letters. The one on the screen is etched with my tears of admiration from when I read it. He wrote in part, "Words when spoken can often be repetitious, fleeting, or forgotten. Written words are more permanent. The year of 18 is tough, I know, because I was 18, and I can remember how difficult it was. Be persistent, be strong, do what you know to be right. As the trials of life ebb and flow, always remember, not only do you have a father standing by, but also a good friend. You see, you have not only been a good son to me, but also a good friend. Never hesitate to call upon me. Thanks for making it so easy to love and appreciate you. Love, Dad." He taught me through letters, conversations, and most importantly, his example. Before the first day of school, he taught me how to deal with a bully. He taught me how to throw a punch, but cautioned me never to throw the first punch, but to make sure that you take care of the bully. He also asked me to look for children in the lunchroom that didn't have friends and to try and befriend them. Periodically, I'd show up in the lunchroom at school with a sandwich, cheese, paper on both sides still attached, and in the bottom of the bag, a whole raw onion. He taught me humor and showed me his love this way. We played basketball one-on-one regularly. He taught me honesty by beating me badly for years. He never took it easy on me and could trash talk with the best of them. When I finally beat him, his defense resembled the Detroit Pistons teams of the 1980s. Whenever I got close, he fouled me really hard. My father is loyal and never forgot where he came from. He told me that when he was a child, he read books from his school while in Searchlight, and it helped him to dream about the world that he wanted to see. He always shared his love of reading and poetry with us. He taught me the importance of thought and reflection. Many nights after my mom had gone to sleep, he'd be in his small closet, alone, on his knees, praying in solitude, or sitting on his stool reading scripture or a book, late into the night for inspiration. My father taught me to treat everybody equally and not based on race or social status. About once a year, we'd get a knock on the door from a stranger that was offering to trim our trees. Usually the trees didn't need to be trimmed, but he let them trim the trees anyway, and he even let them pick their price. He taught that everybody deserves the dignity of a job. My father taught me to love nature. This last month, we walked together in the morning. We enjoyed the desert sky, clouds, the smell of the rain, and the beautiful trees and cactus. The day before my father passed, I walked in to see him. I said, "Hello, it's Key." He opened his beautiful blue eyes. I told him I loved him. He told me he knew. Then, instead of him hanging up or ending the call like usual, similar to those calls that you've all described, I knew something was up. He looked at me and gave me a long, warm goodbye. My father was my best friend. He knew when to write, when to call, when to reach out. His example was one of love. Love of his parents, love of my siblings and our partners and his grandchildren, love of his friends, love of those without a voice, love for his colleagues and staff, and a love for his country, and most of all, a love for my mother. A little later that day, my brother Rory asked my father if he was scared. He hadn't been speaking for quite some time, but said a loud, powerful no. Then Rory asked if he was worried about my mom. He said in almost a whisper, yes. 1 Corinthians 13, 4-8 reads, "Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends." My father's nickname as a kid in Searchlight and at basic high school was Pinky. So please allow me to insert the word pinky for love in this scripture. Pinky is patient and kind. Pinky does not envy or boast. Pinky is not arrogant or rude. Pinky doesn't insist on its own way. Pinky is not irritable or resentful. Pinky does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Pinky bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Pinky never ends. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
I always enjoyed spending time with my dad. When I was 8 years old, I was really jealous of my older brother, Leaf, that he got to go into work with my dad in his law office and be a runner in his office during the summer. I was told I couldn't go because I wasn't old enough to run around downtown Las Vegas by myself. I was not satisfied with that answer, and I wasn't going to stand for that type of injustice. So one morning, I decided to hide in the back of our family station wagon that my dad took to work. This was not a well thought out plan. First problem with my plan is when I got into the station wagon, I was wearing pajamas. Second problem was it turns out my dad wasn't going to his office that morning, he was going to the courthouse. And so as my dad was driving to the office, he said that he felt the sense that somebody was in the car with him. And this was the time when my dad was chairman of the Nevada Gaming Commission, and there were some rough people about in Las Vegas. And so then he saw some hair sticking up over the back seat of the station wagon. And according to him, he thought about what kind of evasive action he needed to take. He was worried until he recognized the head of hair. And I know it's hard for you to imagine right now, but when I was 8 years old, I had a nice, thick, curly mane of blonde hair. So once I heard my dad yell, "Josh," I knew the jig was up. And since my dad had to get to the hearing, my punishment was to stay outside the courthouse in my pajamas with one of the court bailiffs and wait for my sister to pick me up. In spite of that failed stowaway attempt when I was 8, one certainty that I've had throughout my entire life is that my dad loved me unconditionally. I know this because he told me this, just like my other siblings. He'd tell me through phone calls, he'd write me letters and notes that I keep in my law office today and that I read and reflect on when times get tough or stressful. And I'm very appreciative that the love that my dad showed me throughout my life. Now, I realize it might be a little bit out of the ordinary to read from the congressional record at a funeral, but I want to read some of the words that my dad said on the Senate floor on March 30th, 2004. He said, "I wish the people I work with in the Senate knew my father. My father was named Harry Reid, the same name I have. I always looked up to my dad. My dad was excuse me. My dad was uneducated, didn't graduate from the 8th grade, but he's very smart. For example, he was a miner and could go underground with a compass. Come above ground and create a map. People in college cannot do that. He was a carpenter, he was a blacksmith, and he was a much bigger man than I am. I always admired his physical strength. The reason I mentioned Harry Reid, my father, is last night my 15th grandchild was born, a little boy. I mentioned my father because my son Josh told me this morning that they have named my grandson after me. So I have a little grandson named Harry Reid. I hope as the years go by, that little boy will look at his grandfather in the same way I looked at my dad. I'm proud of the name Harry Reid. I even signed my H like my dad did. I hope I can set an example that my grandson will respect and admire. I hope my grandson will have an example set by me that is one he will believe in, family and keeping families together, and being a young man who conducts himself in a proper manner, and that hopefully some of the things I have done and will do will be something he will look to as a role model that maybe he will adhere to. So I want the record to reflect how much I appreciate this great honor to have someone who, through all generations of time, will be the third Harry Reid. I wanted to read this statement to you because I believe it sums up how my dad saw his role as a father and a grandfather. I'm eternally grateful for the example that he set for me and for my children. My dad always would tell me how much he loved me, and he would often tell me when I had my own kids that you can never tell your family that you love them too much. And I appreciate that, what he taught me. I'm appreciative for the positive example and impact that he's had in the lives of me and my children. Dad was so proud of my son Liam, who followed him in his footsteps by attending Utah State, and where he referees soccer games right across at the high school right across the street from where my mom and dad lived in Logan, Utah. My dad used to love calling Liam and hearing his tales of bravery as a soccer referee dealing with unruly soccer parents. And my son Harry, who Dad spoke about on the Senate floor 18 years ago, is now a senior in high school, theater student at Las Vegas Academy of the Arts just down the street from here. After my son Harry told my dad that he wanted to pursue acting, my dad wrote to him and told him that it's better to take risks in trying to pursue what you want in life than to settle for a life without meaning. Just like he did with me, my dad always made sure that Liam and Harry knew that he loved them and that he was proud of them. And that couldn't be proven anymore by my dad's last words to my son Harry on the day before he passed away. And as my brother mentioned, my dad wasn't speaking a lot this day. But my son Harry had been sitting at his grandfather's side, and when he was leaving, he went and held his hand and told his grandfather that he loved him. And my dad immediately responded, "I love you even more." I say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Be still, go on to bed. Nobody knows what lies ahead. And life is short, to say the least. We're in the belly of the beast. Be still, wild and young. Long may your innocence reign, like shells on the shore. And may your limits be unknown, and may your efforts be your own. If you ever feel you can't take it anymore, don't break character. You've got a lot of heart. Is this real or just a dream? Rise up like the sun and labor till the work is done. Be still, one day you'll leave. Fearlessness on your sleeve. When you come back, tell me, what did you see? Was there something out there for me? Be still, character. You've got a lot of heart. Is this real or just a dream? Be still. Be still. Be still. Be still. Over rock and chain, over sunset plain, over trap and snare. When you're in too deep, in your wildest dream, in your made-up scheme, when they knock you down, when they knock you down, don't break character. You've got so much heart. Is this real or just a dream? Rise up like the sun and labor till the work is done. Rise up like the sun and labor till the work is. Rise up like the sun and labor till the work is done.
That was amazing to hear. The day before my dad passed, all of us were together, collectively trying to ease his pain and to comfort him. Music was the only thing that helped. And we took his phone out. We were shuffling through his songs, asking what he wanted to hear. Bob Dylan, no response. Bruce, nothing. And then we said, Brandon, do you want to hear the Killers? And he smiled and he gave us a huge thumbs up. So I want everyone to know that was the last musical request he ever made. We've heard this a little bit already. I could probably start my thoughts this morning by calling for a raise of hands. Did my dad ever hang up the phone on you without saying goodbye? So many of us here, Leader Schumer, the Speaker, presidents, could share their stories. All of us have a story about my dad ending a phone call with them abruptly. Sometimes he even left you talking for a few minutes before you realized that he'd hung up. He once said in an interview, "When the conversation is over, I hang up. I've offended people. I don't mean to. But when there's no need to talk anymore, the call is over. That's part of the narrative of his life. To some, he was the hang-up guy. In our family, ending a call early, and sometimes it's a contest for us, is a verb we call Harry reading. But this morning, I want to help everyone see this kind of humorous trait that he had in a different light. And I think maybe from what you've heard already, you know that as busy as he was on the Senate floor, speaking with a head of state, whatever it was, my dad always took our calls. And he never made us feel that he was busy or didn't have the time to give us a moment to help us. So when he hung up on you, maybe so quickly, it isn't as much about him being brusque as it is or was about him being devoted to my mom or my family. You've seen from my brothers, my sister that spoke, he also took the time to write us letters or notes. Driving over here this morning, we were going through our phones. He was funny when he would text us back. One of my sons texted him when he found out about his diagnosis with cancer to say he was worried. We were praying for you. This is a son that goes to college in Hawaii. And my dad's response was, "You're far from the volcano." You're safe. There were a lot of responses like that. I've kept those notes and messages that he wrote. He took the time during the most challenging times of my life to write me almost weekly. And I've kept those notes, like my brothers have and my sister, to go back to and to look at and to read like Scripture, to reminisce about the old times that they came from, and to get his advice again. Here are some of the words to me that he preserved in these notes and letters. After the birth of my first son, he wrote, "My thoughts are with you often. It seems only yesterday you were such a tiny little boy. Now you are a fine young man and a father yourself. Whatever life has in store for you, you have a backup in your father. Remember this always. Be happy. You have much to give. Realize how much we've been blessed with. This is not because we've earned it, but instead because God has given us a duty to care. You must do this daily." Once he wrote me from the Senate floor, from his desk, during a speech by a senator I won't name, I don't see here, that he said was a little boring. He wrote, "Take good care of yourself. Take your rest when it's available. Exercise. Concentrate on your work. Never return and be sorry for not doing well. Success is not determined in the moment, but by the fruits of your labor and the seeds you've planted. But why am I telling you this? These things you already know." Just before Christmas in 1988, when I was in South America serving the first few months of a 2-year mission, he wrote, "For this Christmas season, you may be assured that my thoughts and prayers are with you. I worry about you often in faraway Ecuador. But I also think of life and its brevity, the formation of you as a person, in the spirit of Christmas is obtainable more easily with the work of serving others. I know of your lonely times, but be strong, for the time will swiftly pass when we are reunited. Until then, do well at your assignment. Years later, he wrote, "It's hard to comprehend the swift passage of time. Make the most of it as you have. These are the days that make fatherhood. I owe you so much because you have been a great son." Knowing him and seeing the life that he lived, it's humbling to think about how devoted he was to us. He was and is our hero. What did we do to deserve our hero to be our father? People know his story. He lived the American dream, you could say, from Searchlight to Washington. From my time as a young boy, it even then seemed fictional. But the reality was that he was a man who simply chose to do his best every day, to do his duty, to take care of his stewardship. Part of that work was to be our father. Part of that work was to be my mother's soulmate. Part of that work was to be your senator or colleague. His devotion and steadfastness in everything he did is probably the best definition of Harry Reiding. Shortly after I left for college, he wrote me to say, "Make the most of your time. As it is said in the Book of Mormon, this life is the time for men to prepare to meet God. Yea, behold, the day of this life is the day for men to prepare his labors." As we heard in the song that Brandon just sung to us, my dad never broke character. He rose up like the sun every day and labored until last week when his work was done. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Good morning. As you've seen, the Reid kids traveled as a pack. And my dad was always looking to provide us an adventure. One summer, he borrowed a friend's boat to take us on an outing. We were on a lake. I don't remember if it was Meade or Mojave, when all of a sudden, the engine stalled. As my dad tried over and over to restart it, the boat began to drift toward a rocky outcropping. Alarmed, he pointed towards the back of the boat and he said, "Rory, throw the anchor overboard." As I hurriedly tried to locate the anchor, my dad, his volume increasing, repeated himself, "Throw it, Rory, throw the anchor." I found it.
And you're listening to Rory Reid right there. Right now, we're going to wrap up our coverage on air, but we will continue to show you this memorial service this morning on your favorite streaming platform, ktnv.com, and our KTNV Facebook page. Next on Channel 13, the Broncos and Chiefs are facing off, so thank you for joining us. And again, we're going to be continuing online.
But as you've heard from my siblings, my father had a keen sense of what we needed as children. And I had a desire to have no adventure. I wanted to just stay home
read a book, watch a movie. So I shouldn't have been surprised one day when he came home and said, "Hey, Rory, I signed you up for Pop Warner football." Look at me, I'm not built for football. But he was at every game the little casinos had that year. And I still don't know why I played football. I really don't have any reason to be concussed regularly, other than, as I've thought about it, the reason I played football was because it gave me time with my father. He loved it more than I did. And it became central to our relationship as I was a teenager. He came to every high school football game I had. And I remember after one big game, my teammates wanted to go out and celebrate. I went home for one reason. I wanted to talk to my dad about the game. And one of my friends called and said, "Hey, where are you? We're out, somewhere doing this or that." And I mouthed to my dad, "Please tell me I can't go out." And he did, and I stayed home with him and talked about the game. Later, my adventures with my father became more political. In 1986, I told my dad I wanted to volunteer on his Senate campaign, and he seemed real pleased. When I was told I was the campaign's official rural Nevada representative, just like football, I feigned excitement. I put a box of pamphlets in my Cutlass Supreme, and I hit the road. My first assignment was in Ely. Nobody on the campaign had the courtesy to let me know that White Pine County is not Reid country. When I arrived there, I checked into the Copper Queen Motel. I didn't have an event till later that evening, and there's not a lot to do in Ely, so I decided to go knock doors. At the first door, a young girl answered. I asked her if her parents were home, and she said to follow her. We walked through her house into the backyard, where her father, a burly fellow with a garden hoe in hand, crouched, working. When he looked up at me, I said very proudly, "My name is Rory Reid. My father is Congressman Harry Reid." Before I could say another word, the gentleman spewed some expletives, raised the hoe above his head, and literally chased me from the yard. So I went back to the Copper Queen and watched a movie. When my dad called to check in later that evening, I told him about my day, and I just remember him laughing. He laughed and laughed, and then he said, "Wait until you get to Elko County. They really love me there." I've also been thinking a lot about a moment I had with my dad when I was very young. I was a boy. I was in the hills of Searchlight with him. One of his brothers was there. I think it was Don. My brother Leaf was there, if I remember right. My dad carried a flashlight as he walked a few steps ahead of me. I didn't know where we were going. After a few minutes, we approached a dark opening of a horizontal mine shaft that disappeared deep into the hillside. As I leaned to one side, he turned on his flashlight, and I peered around him. And when he shined his light into the blackness, I could see the reflection of two bright red eyes that quickly approached, and then a rat scurried past us. And my dad must have known I was anxious, so he grabbed two of my small fingers. He hooked them in his belt loop. He said, "Stay close." And I followed him into the shaft. bathed in the light he provided. But any discussion of our family or my dad should begin and end in one place: Landra. She was the center of his universe. They met as teenagers. They eloped when they were 19, still teenagers. In over 62 years, they provided us a loving example of how a real partnership should work. Near the end of his life, my dad asked for his glasses. He was real sick and couldn't reach for them himself. So I put them on his face, and for the longest time, he just stared at my mom. There was no need for words. This morning, our family was guided here by a police escort. An apostle of our faith then offered his blessing to us. As you saw, a military procession presented the casket of my father in this grand hall. The leaders of the United States Congress are here in his honor. Presidents Obama and Biden will grace us with their words, and next week my dad will lie in state in the United States Capitol Rotunda in the same spot Abraham Lincoln rested. But what I'll cherish most and never forget is what I saw in the private, quiet moments that I was privileged to share close to a Nevada giant. May the God of heaven and earth continue to ensure that his soul rests in peace. Goodbye, Dad, till we meet again.
First, to Lana and Key and Josh and Leith and Rory. What beautiful, beautiful, amazing words. Nothing anyone could ever say would do better than to show what a great man and wonderful father your dad was. Thank you. Thank you. Now, it's truly an honor for me to speak about my dear friend and my mentor, Harry Reid of Searchlight, Nevada, as he would proudly refer to himself. First, let me say to Landra, the love of Harry's life for 62 years, who he called his rock. The only time I ever saw Harry cry is when he told me Landra had had an awful car accident and had broken so many bones. He said over and over again, as tears streamed down his cheeks, "My poor little Landra. My poor little Landra." Landra, I know nothing can replace the hole in your heart right now. But just know that every single person in this room, and literally thousands more across the nation, are holding you in their hearts as you endure this painful loss with your family. I lost my dad a month ago, but he's still with me, just as I know Harry is with all of us and will always be. 5 years ago, at the unveiling of Harry's official portrait, I said, "It'll be quite some time until we see another like Harry Mason Reid." 5 years later, that statement remains as true as ever. He was one of a kind. The presence of so many distinguished guests at this memorial, President Biden, President Obama, Speaker Pelosi, Elder Ballard of the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints, and so many others, so many of my colleagues who came here, both present and those who previously served in the Senate. All of us being here is proof of the wide and deep impact that Harry had on this world. Now, that being said, no doubt, Harry would be extremely annoyed and embarrassed that so many of us made a trip out to Las Vegas for him. I know nothing he'd want less than to sit through a bunch of speeches talking about how great he was. But I knew Harry well, and even though he wouldn't want it, I know a part of him would enjoy it. He'd sort of be like Sid Caesar after he got some applause. No, please, no more applause. I got to know Harry when I came to the Senate in 1999. Here was this man, a soft-spoken Mormon from Searchlight, a town that was miles away from nowhere, at least in my mind. And here I was, a brash Jewish kid out of Brooklyn, a borough that's nearly as populous as the state of Nevada. We were a match made in heaven. I quickly learned that just beneath Harry's soft-spoken nature was a truly honest and original character. There are so many stories. Let me tell you one. Back in 2012, during the Democratic National Convention in Charlotte, Harry called me all excitedly and summoned me to his hotel room late at night. I knocked on the door and Harry let me in. I'm not sure if Landra remembers, but she was there. I thought we were going to discuss some important issue about the next day's convention. But before I could gather my thoughts, Harry pulled me aside into the small little bathroom. We were virtually on top of each other, and he lowered his voice. "Chuck, I want you to take care of something important," he said, before pulling out a wad of cash out of his wallet and peeling off 4 $100 bills. "You know," he said, "you've been working hard and doing a lot of the right things to be Democratic leader, but you need to dress better. Please buy some better shoes." Now, at first I thought Harry pulled me into this little bathroom because he didn't want Landra to see him wasting $400 on the Senate's worst-dressed member. But when I asked Harry about it later, he said to me he didn't want to embarrass me in front of Landra. That was Harry to a T. It was no secret that Harry didn't care for the decorum of public office, but he did know how to dress his part. He cut his hair regularly, he shined his shoes, he wore nice suits from clothiers like Hickey Friedman that I couldn't afford. But a few years later, I got the better of Harry when I showed up to the Senate wearing a Hickey Freeman suit of my own. Harry was surprised. He said, "Chuck, I thought you said you could never afford a Hickey Freeman suit." I told him I can't, so I visited the warehouse in Rochester and bought one at a wholesale price. Harry stopped slipping me money for clothes after that. Now, to be clear, I don't just travel around the state looking for good deals on clothing. For example, as many of you know, every year I attend and speak at dozens of college graduation ceremonies around New York every May and June. Harry, of course, knew about this tradition, and he thought it was hilarious. In fact, he liked it so much that one day he gathered all 100 of his staffers into his office and asked me to deliver the entire 15-minute speech to all of them. But after I became Democratic leader, he started to worry about my habit. Every graduation season, he'd call up my wife, Iris, who's here today, and plead with her. "You got to stop him from going to every graduation and every event. He's got to garner his strength and his health." That's just who Harry was. If you were lucky enough that he cared about you and called you his friend, then he cared about you with every fiber of his being. Sometimes you could even say cared a little too much. You know, Landra wasn't the only woman I've seen Harry kiss passionately on the lips. It was back in 2006. Harry and I were watching the election returns together. They announced our friend Claire McCaskill was the winner of the Senate race in Missouri, and we would take back the Senate. And I kid you not, Harry went up to the TV screen and smacked Claire on his lips on hers, His lips remained attached to the TV screen for a full 10 seconds. He kissed Claire's image so passionately, I had to get up and wipe the copious spittle off the TV screen. That's how much we all loved Harry. So Harry, in short, was one of the most incredible individuals I've ever met. The sort of person you come across only a handful of times in your entire life. He was tough as nails, a fighter to his core, but also one of the most compassionate individuals you could ever imagine. He never forgot where he came from. He always stuck up for the underdog and the little guy. I believe Harry drew a lot of that compassion from his faith. He grew up, of course, as everyone knows, in a town with more than a dozen brothels and no church. But as many here know, after Harry moved to Henderson and met Landra, they both converted to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Harry kept the Book of Mormon in his office, and I'd like to read a verse from 2 Nephi, chapter 9, that gives me great comfort after the loss of my dear, dear friend and mentor. Oh, how great the plan of our God! For on the other hand, the paradise of God must deliver up the spirits of the righteous, and the grave deliver up the body of the righteous, and the spirit and the body is restored to itself again, and all men become incorruptible and immortal, and they are living souls. They are living souls. When you lose someone special, they're never truly gone. They always stay with you. For those of us in the Senate Democratic Caucus, I think that was especially true this past week as we observe the anniversary of the violent insurrection against our U.S. Capitol, one of the darkest moments for our democracy in living memory. The day saw so many acts of selflessness and heroism by our U.S. Capitol Police, who once counted among their esteemed ranks one Harry Mason Reid, who served as an officer while studying at George Washington School of Law. In so many ways, Harry was a guardian and steward of the Senate, literally and figuratively. He took great care of the Senate as an institution, but he also knew that the Senate had to adapt to changing times. As we confront the challenges of the coming weeks and months ahead, I take comfort knowing that Harry is with us in spirit, walking alongside us. He's right there as we continue the work he dedicated himself to for so many years. May God rest his immortal soul, and may his memory be a blessing to all of us.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is indeed a great honor to join this tribute to the towering titan of public service, Senator Harry Reid. Wasn't it deeply moving for all of us to hear Lana and Gloria and Leaf and Josh and Key speak so lovingly of their father? You, his children, along with his many precious grandchildren and his darling great-grandchild, are his greatest pride. But hearing you speak about him shows us what a source of strength you are to him. Of course, the love and happiness he shared with his adoring and beautiful wife, Landra, was a source of joy to all of us who know them. All of us here today are here personally to celebrate the life of our dear friend Harry. Some of us, including 2 presidents of the United States, the vice presidents, members of both the Senate and House, are also here officially to salute a legendary statesman. I have the privilege as Speaker of the House to bring the sympathy of the House of Representatives, where Harry once served. Chuck will say, not as long as he served in the Senate, but I do lay claim to Harry because that's where I first met him. I wasn't in Congress then, but he was in the House and he was running for the United States Senate. It was 1985, in time for the 86 election. George Marcus is here, who took up his cause in San Francisco. My husband Paul is here, and Harry was a high priority for us in winning the Senate. So I'm, as Speaker of the House, pleased to join our distinguished Majority Leader, Steny Hoyer, our members of the Nevada delegation, Dina Titus, Steve Horsford, and Susie Lee, to bring greetings of all of our colleagues, to some we all viewed as a great person. I have a great deal I want to say about Harry, but you know Harry, he was a man of few words, and he wanted everybody else to be a person of few words. And again, we'll go to the phone calls because I immodestly say that I probably got hung up the most by Harry Reid, 2 or 3 times a day for 12 years. That is official working days, sometimes Saturday and Sunday. But anyway, even if we had a really succinct conversation, Harry, subject, this. Problem, this. Timing, this. Even if it was that succinct, you're not click, click. So sometimes I even called him back and said, Harry, I was singing your praises. I was thanking you for the great job you did in the legislation and the rest. I don't want to hear it. Click. I even said to him when he was announcing his retirement, I want to have a big dinner, invite all of your friends that you've served with in the past, in the House, in the Senate, and the rest. I don't want to do it. But I want to sing, for them to sing your praises. I don't want to do it. Save the money, feed the poor. Harry Reid. His modesty made him unique, you might say, in politics. But his humility was rooted in his strong values from a humble childhood, rising from Searchlight to the Spotlight, and becoming one of the most celebrated and consequential Senate leaders in history. Yet, throughout his more than 4 decades of public service, and even at the highest levels, he never forgot his North Star, to fight for working families like his own, and to fight for Nevada. Indeed, Harry loved his home state, you know that. He did everything he could to ensure Nevadans' voices were heard, whether protecting the state's natural environment or its political environment, especially its coveted role in the presidential selection process. To observe Harry lead and legislate was to see a master at work, fearless, strategic, knowledgeable, and brilliant. He was a pioneer. He saw it like a pioneer. As Senate leader, few could rival Harry's understanding of his senators, their states, their needs, their ambitions. And in all of our conversations, before he hung up, I never heard Harry say an unkind word about any of his Senate colleagues, Democratic or Republican. For the 12 years we served together as leaders in our respected houses, I had the privilege of seeing his mastery firsthand, rescuing American families with the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, protecting hardworking consumers with the Dodd-Frank reforms, and championing the passage of the Affordable Care Act, just to name a few, under the leadership of President Barack Obama and Vice President Joe Biden. When he retired, and we would no longer be speaking constantly on the phone, he came to my office. This was when he announced his retirement. He said, Nancy, I have something for you to remember me by. I thought it might be a handwritten note or a special photo. Instead, he unveiled a massive bald eagle, stuffed but the wings still capable of fluttering in the breeze. Shocked, I said, Harry, did you go hunting and kill an endangered species? He said, no, he died flying into a power line, and I called him Sparky. Whether symbolic of his patriotism with the bald eagle, his environmentalism, or his dry sense of humor, and dry it was, it is one of the finest and most curious gifts I've ever received, and a subject of great question in the Speaker's office. Today, this majestic bird has flown from the Senate Leader's office over to the Speaker's office, appropriately and with his permission, now called Harry. For his great legislative achievements, his most enduring public legacy will be that he was beloved, a word not often used to describe political leaders. He was beloved by his colleagues, by his staff, by maintenance workers, and by the Capitol Police, and as the leader mentioned, with whom he served as a young man as the Capitol Policeman. Truly beloved by all because he treated everyone with dignity and respect. Next week, Leader Schumer and I will have the solemn privilege of welcoming Harry back to the Capitol to lie in state, a proper tribute for an historic, patriotic American. May it be a comfort to Landra and the beautiful family, all who love him, that so many Americans mourn with you at this sad time. Paul and I, who loves Landra and loved Harry, send you our personal sympathy and love. God truly blessed America with the life and legacy of Harry Reid. May he rest in peace.
Thank you all. We're grateful for the entertaining, loving, and tender memories that have been shared. We will now be honored to hear from another of Senator Reid's very talented friends, Carole King, who at the request of Landra will perform In the Name of Love. Former President Barack Obama will then deliver the eulogy. Following President Obama's remarks, we will hear from the President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden. At the conclusion of the President's remarks, the closing prayer and benediction will be given by a granddaughter, Savannah Janes Reid. Please remain in your seats after the closing prayer for a special send-off.
President and First Lady Biden, Vice President Harris and Second Gentleman Emhoff, Leader Schumer, Speaker Pelosi, Elder Ballard, most of all to Harry's beloved Landra, and the Reid children and grandchildren, friends, and former staff. It is a great honor to be with you today to pay tribute to my friend Harry Reid. Now, to be clear, and as Chuck mentioned in his remarks, I suspect Harry himself would not have wanted to sit through this thing. Harry did not like being the center of attention. It made him a little awkward. He was uncomfortable when people said too many nice things about him. But as he looks down on us today, Harry is going to have to suck it up. Because few people have done more for this state and this country than this driven, brilliant, sometimes irascible, deeply good man from Searchlight, Nevada. I first met Harry in 2005 after I'd been elected to the Senate and Harry had been elevated to become Democratic leader. And I was the sole African American in the Senate at the time, a mixed kid with a funny name. And given how different our backgrounds were, I did not know how well Harry and I would hit it off. He was older, of course. His kids were grown. I didn't know what kind of music he liked, but I figured he didn't listen to Jay-Z. On the issues, he had a reputation for being a little more conservative than I was, reflecting the politics of his western state. So he invited me to his office for a chat shortly after I'd been sworn in. There was not a lot of small talk. In fact, there was not a lot of talk at all. He asked me what committee assignments I wanted. I told him. He said he'd see what he could do. Half the time, his voice was so soft, I could barely hear what he was saying. Afterwards, my senior colleague from Illinois, Dick Durbin, asked me how it went. I said, man, I don't know. The whole conversation lasted maybe 10 minutes. He did not seem particularly pleased with my taking up his time. Don't worry, Dick said. If Harry didn't like you, it would have only lasted 5 minutes. That was Harry. As has been observed, Harry was not a schmoozer or a backslapper. He did not regale you with long, drawn-out stories, and he did not appreciate long, drawn-out stories. Despite the years he'd spent in Congress, despite all the power he wielded, his reputation as being the consummate Washington insider, what I came to realize was that Harry always remained something of an outsider in Washington. Which makes sense, given the remarkable path to the Senate that he had taken, a path that was at least as unlikely, if not more unlikely, than mine. Others have mentioned Harry's extraordinary journey out of Searchlight, a tiny desert town an hour away from just about everywhere. How Harry had to hitchhike more than 40 miles each way to Henderson and stay with relatives just to go to high school. How he put himself through college and law school, moonlighting as a uniformed Capitol Police officer to help cover tuition and support a young family. Fair to say it was not easy. There must have been times where he felt doubt about achieving his dreams. Like the time when his car broke down and he walked into the dean's office to say that he wasn't sure if he could afford to finish school. As Harry remembered it, the dean looked him up and down and said, "Mr. Reid, why don't you just quit?" That dean did not know Harry Reid's character. Like others who would later underestimate the man, hardship had forged a steel in Harry, a fighting spirit that explained his success in the boxing ring despite being significantly undersized. He liked to talk about his boxing. You know, Barack, I wasn't a great athlete. I wasn't big and strong like some of the guys I went up against. But I had two things going for me. I could take a punch, and I never gave up. That's about right. And that same dogged determination marked Harry Reid's political career. He lost his first Senate race by just 600 votes. 6 months later, he ran for mayor of this town and lost in a landslide. But Harry did not give up. He got himself a seat in the House, then the Senate, finally became Senate Majority Leader, and let's face it, he enjoyed every minute of proving doubters wrong again and again and again. Sometimes the people who motivate us the most, Harry would later say, are the ones who believe in us the least. So yes, being tough, being a fighter, was one of Harry's singular characteristics. Apparently, once a staffer handed him some draft remarks in which he was supposed to refer to himself as a former boxer, and Harry crossed out the word former. He was 70 years old at the time. But there were other aspects to Harry's character that helped explain his extraordinary achievements. Qualities that, at this particular moment in our history, seem especially relevant. First and foremost, Harry was a pragmatist. At a time when so many Americans across the political spectrum apply strict purity tests to our politicians, demanding they toe the line on just about every issue, at a time when so often compromise is portrayed as weakness, Harry had a different view. He didn't believe in highfalutin theories or rigid ideologies. He thought most people make decisions based on their life experience, based on the immediate needs of their families, based on their own self-interest, no matter what they may tell themselves. And as a result, Harry met people where they were, not where he wanted them to be. And he was willing to cut deals, even with folks he didn't agree with or particularly like. I heard Nancy Pelosi say she never heard Harry say anything bad about any of his colleagues. I don't know about that, Nancy. But he would work with them. I love Nancy, but But he would work with them if that's what it took to move things forward. In a battle between perfection and progress, Harry always chose progress. And that pragmatism made Harry adaptable. When he first got to Washington, Harry's voting record wasn't so different from those who'd represented his state in the past, holding traditional positions on issues like gun rights, immigration, reproductive health. But as Nevada and the country changed, as Harry met more and more people from different walks of life and realized their struggles weren't that different from his family's had been in Searchlight, Harry's views on some of these issues changed as well. He didn't consider that a weakness. He understood that he wasn't always going to be right about everything. He knew how to listen and to learn, and was humble enough to admit when he had to change his mind and grow. And by the way, speaking from personal experience, it helps when you're married to somebody who's wiser and brighter than you. I know something about that. After Harry introduced a bill repealing birthright citizenship in the 1990s, for example, Landra pointed out that her own father had been a Russian immigrant. Later, Harry would say, "I came to the realization that I was way off base. I'm so glad she righted the ship." Now, of course, there are plenty of politicians who change their positions just because they want to get reelected. They've got their fingers out to the wind. They're interested in clinging to power for its own sake. But for Harry, the whole point of holding office, the whole point of wielding power, was to actually get things done on behalf of those he represented. During his time as leader, that is exactly what he did. He got things done. Without Harry, we would not have passed the Recovery Act, helping to prevent another Great Depression. Without Harry, we wouldn't have saved people's jobs, helped people stay in their homes. Without Harry, we would not have passed Wall Street reform, reining in some of the worst abuses of the financial industry. Without Harry, there would be no Affordable Care Act. People forget that there were many times during the debate over health care reform when it looked like nothing was going to get passed. But Harry, working with Nancy Pelosi in the House, working with then Vice President and now President, my partner in this fight, Joe Biden, Harry refused to give up, maneuvering and applying pressure like only he could. The deals Harry made to get that law done didn't always look pretty. They got votes. Whenever I would object to a change he wanted to make, whether because of some policy concerns or worries about the optics, Harry would tell me, with some exasperation in his voice, "Mr. President, you know a lot more than I do about health care policy, okay? But I know the Senate." And he was right. Harry did know the Senate better than just about anyone else. More importantly, he understood why the work we were doing mattered. Growing up, Harry's family didn't have health care. He told me he didn't even know what it was. When Harry's brother broke his leg, he stayed in bed and waited for it to heal. When his father needed a tooth removed, he yanked it out himself. Harry remembered those times. He knew what that was like. So when Harry put everything he had into passing the ACA, he didn't do it to burnish his own legacy. He did it for the people back home and families like his who needed someone looking out for them when nobody else was. Harry got things done. And here's another thing that set Harry apart. He was always unfailingly himself. That may not sound exceptional, but in Washington, it is an exceedingly rare quality. Harry was the first to admit he wasn't the most charismatic or politically correct speaker. After a press conference, he'd sometimes go up to a staffer and say, "Okay, tell me everything I did wrong." But Harry knew who he was. And he had the distinct advantage of not really caring what other people thought of him. In a town obsessed with appearances, Harry had a real vanity deficit. He didn't like phonies. He didn't like grandstanding. He was proud of the fact he didn't own a tuxedo. When he had to go to fundraisers, he would try to get out in under 10 minutes. And apparently the only White House congressional picnic Harry ever attended was for his son Key's benefit. Key wanted to impress a girl he was dating at the time. Key and Miley ended up getting married, so Harry grudgingly admitted it was worth the sacrifice. Finally, for all of Harry's toughness, for all his hard-nosed views about politics, Harry loved his family, loved his staff, and Harry was a true and loyal friend. During my time in the Senate, he was more generous to me than I had any right to expect. He was one of the first people to encourage me to run for president, believing that despite my youth, despite my inexperience, despite the fact that I was African American, I could actually win, which at the time made one of us. You wanted Harry in the foxhole with you. His willingness to fight by my side, to stick with me even when things weren't going our way. And my poll numbers had gone down, and some Democrats thought it might be prudent to maintain a healthy distance from me. His willingness to be there and fight would last throughout my presidency. It's a debt to him that I could never fully repay. I remember toward the end of my time in the White House, Michelle and I invited Harry and Landra over for dinner along with Joe and Jill and Nancy and Paul, Chuck and Iris. And during the meal, Harry was his usual curmudgeonly self. Occasionally, he'd offer an opinion on this or that, mutter about the food was pretty good. But generally, he was keeping his own counsel. But at the end of the night, those who were there, I suspect, will remember this. I sure do. Harry suddenly asked for everyone's attention. "Listen," he said, "everybody here knows that I don't show a lot of emotion, okay? That's just how I grew up. I just want to say that I'm really proud of what I've done with this president, and that I love this guy. And then, without any warning, he leaned over and kissed me on the cheek. I think it's fair to say that we were all surprised. And I laughed. I said, well, thanks, Harry. I love you too, man. And I put my arm around him, which I think was too much for him. Because he said, well, okay then, it's past my bedtime. And with that, he and Landra headed for the door. Pragmatism, adaptability, a premium on getting things done, a lack of pretension, an abiding loyalty. That's what Harry Reid represented. A man of old school virtues. They are qualities that are in short supply these days. And yet, it seems to me they are precisely the qualities our democracy requires. Harry understood we don't have to see eye to eye on everything in order to live together and be decent toward each other. And that we can learn to bridge differences of background and race and region. He knew that our system of government isn't based on demanding that everybody think exactly the same way. In fact, it presumes that in a country as big and diverse as ours, people rarely will. But we can still work together. Harry may have been a proud Democratic partisan. He didn't shy away from bare-knuckle politics, but what is true is that I never heard Harry speak of politics as if it was some unbending battle between good and evil. Because he knew what was true for himself was true for everybody, that we're all a bundle of contradictions. We all have our flaws. We all have our blind spots. But despite all that, it was possible for us to affirm our collective humanity, because that's what made America great. Once we had both left office, I didn't see much of Harry. But we'd call each other on the phone from time to time. And he'd tell me about Landra, and he'd speak with great pride about his kids and his grandkids and all that they were doing. He told me about his illness and the treatments he was going through and what was keeping him busy. And at some point during those calls, he'd usually mention somebody he'd run into who had thanked him for getting them health care or saved their job. And particularly in recent months, maybe knowing that he didn't have much time left, he'd allow himself a hint of nostalgia and talk about how together we'd made a darn good team. How we'd done pretty well for the American people. And as I would start to reply, yes, he would cut me off. Okay then, Mr. President, he'd say, and hang up. The whole conversation would last about 5 minutes. But in those 5 minutes, he'd communicate more than some folks do in a couple hours. That's who Harry was. A man who knew what was important and didn't believe in dwelling on what wasn't. One former colleague explained it by saying to Harry, goodbye was an unnecessary word. It might not have been necessary for Harry, but it is for us. Goodbye, Harry. Thank you for everything. Nevada has never had a greater champion. The Senate and the country benefited from your extraordinary leadership, and I could not have asked for a better, truer friend. I sure did love you back.
Well, Mr. President, Rock, I have to tell you, every time I hear a dial tone, I think of Harry. You all think I'm kidding. I'm not. Jill and I are here for Harry, but he wouldn't want us to really be here for just him, as everybody has referenced. Landa, we're here for you and for the family. Eulogies are for the living. You know, it's a true love story when you're still talking about your first date 60 years later, Gov. Harry never tired of telling the time you two kids had to push start his car, making your way down the road with wide smiles on your face. My recollection is he called it, when he told me the story, one of those, quote, moments that turn a life and that stay with you until the last breath. Landra, what a life you turned together until his last breath. Lana and Rory and Leaf, Josh, Key, all the grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Seeing and hearing you talk about him today, it's clear. My dad used to have an expression. He'd say, you were blood of his blood, bone of his bone. You are the product of Harry and Landa Reid. What a gift. What a gift God gave you. What a gift that was and is. Elder Ballard, President Obama, Vice President Harris, second gentleman, Governor Sisolak, thanks for the passport into the state, and Iris, and Chuck Schumer, and Paul and Nancy Pelosi, members of the Nevada congressional delegation, Senator Cortez Mastows and Rosen, and Representatives Horsford and Lee and Titus, members of Congress, Democrat and Republican, past and present, distinguished guests. What a gift Harry Reid was to the state, to this nation, and to so many of us individually. I know he's smiling right now. Only Harry Reid at his send-off would sandwich the speaker between former President of the United States, Carole King, and the Killers. Thanks, Harry. You've always had a great sense of humor. He always had to win, and he always did. He got me again, but he always got me. The first time I met Harry, I got a call asking whether, as I'd just been elected at 29 years old in the United States Senate, I hadn't even turned 32 yet. I was a newly elected senator, and he asked me to campaigned for his election for Nevada's Senate seat being vacated by a man I'd only just begun to know, Alan Bible. The first thing when I met him in Nevada, we were talking about where he's from, and he said, well, I used to have to go out and shoot mad dogs. I thought, what in the hell am I doing here? I swear to God, I used to go out and shoot mad dogs. I'm thinking, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. What's going on? Harry lost that general election by less than 600 votes to Paul Laxalt. And he never let me forget thinking that I probably cost him those 600 votes. I'm only kidding about that piece, but I probably did. But when he asked me to come back and campaign for him when he ran for the House in 1982, he won that time. Then he won in 86. And we go on to serve in Congress together for more than 30 years. We worked together with Barack during the 8 years we were in office. And even when Harry was done in the Senate, he was never really done, as all of you from Nevada know. He'd asked me to campaign for an awful lot of Nevada Democrats, many of whom are here today. I could never say no, although you probably said, oh, God, he invited Biden into my district? Well, I talked to him often during this past election, taking his advice, and Londra can tell you, I've come into his home on more than one occasion to visit and get his advice, and where I should be going in order to win. After he won, one of the things that Harry did, which was sort of incongruous with Harry, as you've heard today, he sent me a text. I've saved it. He said, I'm so proud, Joe, you're my brother. We won. Well, it made a big deal to me. It was a big deal to me that he felt that way. You know, Harry never wrote what he didn't believe. It made me feel good. He gave me a sense of confidence. I felt like he was my brother. I counted on him. And I know so many of you felt that same way about Harry as well throughout his career and your relationship with him. Over 5 decades, we became genuine friends. The Irish Catholic kid from Scranton, Pennsylvania, and the Latter-day Saint from Searchlight. You think I'm kidding. But Harry is like the guys I grew up with back in Scranton and Claymont, Delaware. Harry would always have your back, like the guys I grew up with. Harry had mine, and he knew I had his. Although I sometimes wondered, when I was trying to make an important point to Harry about whether he really did have my back as he hung up. But to tell the truth, every time he would do it, I knew it was the real Harry. It was him. He had all he needed. He didn't want any more or need any more. And we did share some similarities. As Barack said, we have loving families, wives who are smarter and better looking than we were. And Harry and I both like to talk a lot. I'm just testing whether you're asleep yet. But whether you serve with Harry for decades or you were new to America just a few days ago, you wanted Harry in your corner, and that's not hyperbole. His toughness was distinctly Nevadan. His story was unmistakably American. His remarkable journey has been told by so many, because it has been traveled by so few. A desert shack he called home, miles of hitchhike to school, a boxing ring where he always got up, family tragedies endured, the cancer he and Londra fought, the halls of power he walked, the state he transformed, the country he shaped. He was proof that there's nothing ordinary about America. Ordinary Americans can do anything given half a chance. We, the people, are pretty damn extraordinary. America's an idea that anybody given a shot can reach their potential. Harry was extraordinary, though. He and I grew up on different sides of the country, but we came from the same place where certain values ran deep. First, loyalty, faith, resolve, service, your word. It was pounded into my head from the time I was a child. Joe, you're a man of your word. Without your word, you're not a man. And he met the marker, what I always believe was the most important thing which you can measure a person by, their actions and keeping their word. If Harry said he was going to do something, he did it. He didn't do it the modern day rationale is. When I told you I would do that, I didn't realize that this would happen. No matter what happened, he gave you his word. He kept it. You could bank on it. That's how he got so much done for the good of the country for so many decades. That's how he literally saved, we forget it, Social Security during the Bush years. Stopped Yucca Mountain from becoming a nuclear waste site. Secured the votes for the Affordable Care Act. It's how he helped us rein in Wall Street, the excesses, and repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It's how he created Nevada's first national park and conserved Lake Tahoe. How he always championed Native Americans and tribal communities. So much more. None of it was easy. Not a lot of it was particularly popular when he was doing it. The thing about Harry, he never gave up. He never gave up. He never gave up on anybody he cared about. Like every great leader, he led the Democratic caucus just not by speaking, but by listening, by hearing all points of view, finding a common ground. Harry cared so much about his fellow Americans and so little about what anybody thought of him. It was all searchlight, no spotlight. I always appreciate the private comfort, and so does Jill, who's with me tonight, that he offered me and Jill in difficult moments in our lives. We know we're not the only ones. Since his passing, we've all heard those wonderful tributes. The gracious way he would console the grieving, and encourage someone living with a disability. I still have that picture of our buddy Max Baucus. Max losing 3 of his limbs. Harry's standing in front of him in a wheelchair holding his cheeks. You know, Max knew. Max knew. Harry cared about him. The generous way he would empower a new colleague or insist that the new moms and dads on his staff would put their family first, even before their job, and do it always. The genuine friendships he made with the Capitol Police have been recognized 3 times because he was one of them. He wore the uniform. To a friend in need, Harry's voice was soft and gentle. In praise of himself, he was stone cold silent. In pursuit of fairness and prosperity, his voice would echo and will echo for generations in this state. Look, let there be no doubt. Harry Reid will be considered one of the greatest Senate Majority Leaders in history. I've served longer than all but out 12 United States Senators. Served there for over 36 years. I've had the honor of serving with a few of those names to be on that short list. For Harry, it wasn't about power, it was about the sake of power, about the power to be able to use power to do right by people. That's why you wanted Harry in your corner. And that's what we should remember as a nation today. Harry knew better than most how difficult democracy is, that the idea of America itself is under attack from dark and deepening forces, that we're in a battle for the soul of America, Londa, I remember sitting in a room with Harry when he was supporting me for president. And my explaining to him the reason I decided to run when I had decided I was never going to do that again. I was watching all those neo-Nazis come out of the fields down in Virginia, chanting anti-Semitic Bible, carrying Nazi flags. And he asked me what. I said, we have to restore the soul of America. No one knew it better than Harry. Protecting democracy requires vigilant stewardship. But Harry's life shows that from our darkest days, we can find light and find hope. Just look at his life. It's just about every respect. Harry Reid came into this world with the odds against him. He believed life, and he lived it, and he left it, believing anything was possible. He's demonstrated that anything is possible. Look at this incredible family. Harry, in a small way, reminds me of my dad. My dad used to say, Joey, never explain and never complain. Remember one day we were having an event when I was running for my, I guess it was 5th term. We're at my house. I was feeling a little sorry for myself talking about a family loss of a daughter. And my dad said, I'll be back in a minute. He left the house. We were waiting for people to show up. Went up to the local Hallmark store and came back with a cartoon. There was a little brass plaque with 2 sections to it. There were 2 clips from the cartoon character Hagar the Horrible. And in one, Hagar the Viking on a ship had been moving along near the rocks. Lightning comes out of the sky, chars the horns of his helmet, breaks the mast of his ship, and he's looking up at God, and he's going, God, why me? In the next frame is a picture of Hagar and the ship and a voice coming down from heaven saying, why not? That was my dad. What makes you so special these things wouldn't happen to you? Why not? Stand up. Get up. Never bow, never bend, never yield. That was Harry. Never complain. That's what I admired so much about him. Above Harry's desk, as we all know, in the Senate office, was a giant portrait of Mark Twain. They both, Harry and Mark Twain, loved Nevada. And they both knew how to say things we know to be true about ourselves and about our country. For Harry, it was this, as he said himself. He said, quote, I grew up around people of strong values, even if they rarely talked about them. Went on to say they loved their country, worshiped God, never shunned hard work, and never asked for special favors. That's Harry. That's America. Here's someone Mark Twain himself would have written about as a defining character in the American story had he known Harry. To his staff, known as Team Reid, he lost an incredibly genuine role model. But we see you carrying on HMR's legacy. The people of Nevada, you lost a beloved son. But his spirit's always going to burn as bright as the desert sun. To a nation, we lost a giant of America. A plain-spoken, honorable, decent, brave, unyielding man. May this be his legacy. Call on each of us to be our best, to speak truth from the heart, to take up the remaining rounds of Harry Reid's good fight for the America we all love. What a gift. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. What a gift. What a life of a nation that he turned until his last breath. Landra, God bless you. God bless the entire family. May God bless my friend Harry, a great American. May God protect our troops.
Dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful to be gathered together today, from world leaders to family members, to celebrate the life of Poppy, of Harry. We are grateful for the beautiful words and music that have been shared today and for all the preparation and thought that went into this service. Most importantly, though, we are grateful for the years that we had Harry on this earth. We are grateful for his good works in the community, his grit, his tenacity, and we're especially grateful for the loyalty, the love, and the dedication that he showed his family and friends. We ask for a blessing of comfort and peace to be with his family, especially to Lana, to Rory, to Leaf, to Josh, and to Key, and especially to Grammy. That she can be lifted up and comforted by the love of those around her. And that she can keep Poppy's memory with her always. We pray that his memory can be a blessing to us, and that as we serve thee, we can remember his good example of service, and that the best of him can be carried on in the lives of his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchild, and all those that he touched. We say these things in Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Mr. President, and all. Much has been said about Senator Reid's telephone etiquette in this service. From my own experience, I have concluded, to paraphrase a line from a popular 1970s movie, that for Harry, love means never having to say goodbye. And because of the love of the Savior, Jesus Christ, neither do we. Instead, we say to Harry, God be with you till we meet again. Senator Reid's casket will be flown to Washington, where he will lie in state at the Capitol Rotunda, with an additional ceremony honoring his life to be held on January 12th. Senator Reid will make a final journey home to Searchlight, where he will be interred near other members of his family. As the Reid family now departs, we ask the congregation to stand and join Brandon Flowers, who will lead us in singing the Nevada State Song. Home means Nevada. The words appear on the program, and for those of you who are not from here, it's Nevada, not Nevada. Brandon Flowers sang this song often at Senator Reid's events, and as we all know, Harry Reid is first and foremost a devoted son of Nevada. Please remain standing until the family and special guests have departed. Due to COVID protocols, the family will not be able to receive guests after the service. And thank you all for being here today.
So I first met Senator Reid in 2009, and we were lucky enough to get to tour the Capitol. And it was just an inspiration for me because here was the Senate Majority Leader, and he came from basically the same dirt that I came from, and we shared the same faith. And it wasn't 5 minutes into the meeting when he waved for Chuck Schumer to come over, and he had me sing the Nevada State song in the office. And I think he was showing me off a little bit, but I also, as we've all heard today, I think he loved where he was from. And it makes it a lot easier for me to stand here and tell you how much I love Nevada. And so, as we said, we all have these. We're going to feel free to sing along with me. Way out in the land of the setting sun, where the wind blows wild and free, there's a lovely spot, just the only one, that means home, sweet home to me. If you follow the old Kit Carson trail till the desert meets the hills, oh, you certainly will agree with me, it's the place of 1,000 thrills. Home means Nevada, home means the hills, home means the sage and the pine. Out by the Truckee silvery rills, out where the sun always shines. Here is the land that I love the best, fairer than all I can see. Deep in the heart of the Golden West, home means Nevada to me. Whenever the sun at the close of day colors all the western sky, oh, my heart returns to the desert gray and the mountains towering high, where the moonbeams play in shadowed glen with the spotted fawn and doe. All the livelong night until morning light is the loveliest place I know. Home means Nevada, home means the hills, home means the sage and the pine. Out by the Truckee silvery rills, out where the sun always shines, there is the land that I love the best, fairer than all I can see. Deep in the heart of the Golden West, home means Nevada to me.
God be with you. God be with you.
All right, obviously a beautiful ceremony, Dave, there for Harry Reid today at the Smith Center. One filled with funny stories, family, colleagues, including two presidents. President Biden spoke and former President Barack Obama. And, you know, a service filled with deep love of family, faith, and service. And Dave, two of the words today that were used to describe Harry Reid, which pretty much sums it up, was a fighter and loyalty. That's how we remember him.
So much eloquent testimony, and we expect to hear those kinds of great speeches from our elected officials because they're used to talking in front of the public. But what touched my heart the most was those thoughts that were shared by his family, his children and his grandchildren, and those poignant thoughts of times of life when they were touched by their father or their grandfather. That really means so much. I think what we just heard, actually, Tricia, is just a whole treasure trove of words to live by and a life to live by through Harry Reid's living of his own life.
Yeah, and the story about him looking at his wife, 62 years of marriage, a life well spent. Dave, thank you so much for joining us for the coverage today. We certainly send our condolences to all of the loved ones of Senator Harry Reid. We want to thank you, our viewers, for joining us. We hope you have a great afternoon.